Good morning, everybody. It's me again. I promise I haven't been standing here since yesterday, but really good to be back this morning and have another go. So I was reading one of the many kind of LinkedIn posts and tweets yesterday, and I noted the word elderly in one of the posts, and I stroked my chin vigorously and thought our post-yoga, granola eating, active retirees would be weeping into their breakfast over that term, elderly. And it really reminded me of some conversations we've had recently with our consumers. So we've segmented our market and in particular, some really interesting sort of kind of post-retirement segments. Like, unlike most companies, we don't make all of the over 50s one segment. There are at least 8 to 10 over 50 segments. But we deep dive with them, and we were asking them about the concept of being older or old, and they said, no, we're not old, we're retired. Oh, right, okay. So I didn't realize the two things were mutually exclusive. And they said, well, that's because old happens after you've retired. That's when it happens, which I thought was kind of interesting. You know, you kind of, and what they really meant was this period, retirement, was the period that you kind of call the shots. You might, you know, execute purpose and pleasure in equal measure, do a bit of working, paid or unpaid, do a bit of leisure, do a bit of support. It's your period to have your time with. Old, that is something that happens perhaps when you can't do any of that stuff, and it is way into the future. And I think it's probably something, a little story it's worth remembering through the day when we kind of, how we talk about people in these different life stages. So yesterday I talked about the components that underpin the big window and Saga's thinking about age-related needs, and indeed our kind of purpose and proposition development. And just a reminder of those 3 C's: connections, confidence, and contribution as being kind of critical for us in terms of what we develop around. And this morning I'm going to talk for a really short while, I promise, on how we think about retirement as a key life stage for Saga and how the notion of that is changing, how we need to change it because the new generation thinks about it differently, as I've just kind of referred to, but also how retirement has to change economically. Just because a few people asked yesterday, if you're not aware of Saga as an organisation, think AARP, but quite a bit smaller because we're the UK version of AARP, but we're commercial and we sell holidays, cruises, money products, insurance products, and we have just launched a health and wellbeing platform that Gillian will talk through. So I'm going to just chat through the impetus for Saga to focus on this new generation of people who are reaching retirement now and seeking to maximise it before I hand over to Gillian, who's going to join us by video recording to talk through how she's used all the research that we've talked about to build spaces. I'm going to conclude with some thoughts on engagement, bring it all together in a quick summary, and then just cover our asks of the UN, which I think we'll probably come back to in our panel conversation, won't we, John? So, first chart, retirement phases then. So we think about our market in kind of 4 phases, and these really are the 4 phases that financial planners use. They're quite useful in terms of their structure. So sort of kind of pre-retirement phase, that kind of time leading up to, in the UK, the 65-ish moment when you probably are going to retire. Now, I know there is quite a bit of variability around that, depending on where you are in life, but you know, in the main. And then we see a sort of 8 to 10 year period, and we've measured this as well, and people's expectations of spending around it and all sorts of stuff, but an 8 to 10 year period, which we call active retirement. This is when people want to do Machu Picchu, right, in the Great Wall of China, and, you know, kind of redo their kitchen and all the rest of it. So a kind of really active period that people are really stimulated in. Then they move into a passive, what we call a passive period, which isn't about kind of just sitting in your armchair with tartan slippers, but it is less physically demanding activities than in the active period. So kind of gardening, photography, you know, that sort of thing. And we're certainly working in the community. And thirdly, we think about the supported phase. And during this phase, we see that actually family members are starting to engage much more in the decision making, particularly for less familiar or more complex tasks. Now, as I said, there is some variability, you know, around these time spans, depending on the individual. Of course, this is a bit of a suppression to the mean, but the shape, nevertheless, is, you know, kind of roughly the same. And we see that we can plot our segments indeed across these phases, which are really interesting. But things are changing. They are, both in terms of who occupies these phases, the new generational groups coming through, and the shape of them going forward. So that's the bit I'm going to talk about a bit more. So, generational changes then. So what I've done here is just kind of given a 2027 outlook in terms of what we're expecting. Now, the boomers the silent generation in 2027 in the UK are going to be in their like late 70s, kind of, you know, reaching 80 moment. So they will be fairly kind of squashed in terms of their market size, about kind of 4 million. And they're interesting in that they come from a very different place. You know, they tend to be quite deferent, cautious. You know, they definitely respect men in white coats and bank managers and the insurance brokers that come round to the house. They have a completely different context about how they operate and how they see their age. And then, but what we see coming in behind them to the active period of retirement are the boomers. And we were just chatting about this, but the boomers are completely different. This is not a kind of sliding linear graph, is it? We're not just edging down the age scale. We are tripping into a completely different generation that went through the '68 protests, that kind of listen to rock, that are sexually hedonistic. In Saga, we've just done the Great Generation Experience Sex Survey, and let me tell you that 30% of our over 50s and indeed over 60s think no strings attached sex is perfectly okay. This is a completely different group. The other thing about them is that they are successful. What we thought was really interesting about them is that they have always been successful. They haven't had to try very hard. This is the first group to really get inheritance, house price rises in the UK, DB pensions. So they haven't planned that much because they've tripped into success all the way through their life. So they get to this age period and they're thinking, well, this is going to be easy. I don't need to think too much about planning, finance, health, because, you know, life has been pretty good for me. So we have to think about that as well. And then we've got the Gen Xers behind them, individualists, composite careers, you know, a completely different perspective as well. And this is important, this generational change, because they think about retirement and their place in it completely differently. So let's just have a think about kind of change and where we have to kind of overlay our thinking about when people change. Back in 2012, when I was launching the big window, actually, I thought I need I need a platform. What am I really engaged in? I'm really engaged in how old people perceive themselves to be. So I approached the BBC and I said, you've got a few problems with age portrayal. There was quite a lot of news around it at the time, for those people who remember, in the UK, and said, let's just stop talking about just real age. Let's start talking about perceived age. You give me the data from your 17,000 strong media panel, and I will develop an age perception model around that media panel for you, which is exactly what we did. And people who have looked at age perception before will pretty much, I can't believe I've put so many clicks in this chart, will have definitely seen this kind of shape before. So the bar charts here show the gap between real age and perceived age. And you can see from the point of 30, the gap between real and perceived age gets larger and larger and larger and larger until the point of 75. And you can see that's where I've stopped the charts, and that's on purpose, because actually the shape of this chart is curvilinear. After 75, something happens. The gaps start to get smaller again. People's perceived age becomes really much more apparent to them. They know kind of how old they are. I'll come back to that. I just want to reflect the fact that we then, 2 years later with BBC World, did a global version of this. Again, so many clicks, I can't believe it, but exactly the same shape for the world data. 15 countries around the world took part in this, from all parts of the world: Latin America, Middle East, East and Western Europe, US, Australia, and so on. Very much each of them same shape. Some variability, but the same shape. And actually, when we looked at some country differences here, it wasn't the more affluent countries that were even younger at heart than the mean. The youngest at heart, in fact, were our samba dancing Latin American countries. There is some message in here, surely, about mindset and age perception, which I'm particularly interested in. So when people asked us whether, kind of socio-demographics and in particular affluence made a difference, it didn't in our UK data, and it didn't really overseas as well. So kind of really interesting for us. So there's something about this 75 moment, and that is the point of showing you that data. So when we look at that 75 moment, kind of something happens for us in terms of the gap between real and perceived age, in terms of the likelihood of vulnerability statistics that we see with the FCA data that I pointed to yesterday. People tell us at Saga, and we see that they're engaging in different types of activities around that point, and they expect to spend a smaller proportion of their retirement income. In fact, the smallest proportion of their retirement income is between about 75 and 84 amongst our citizens. So we can see that there is a turning point. We're expecting that turning point actually to shift in the next few years, shift upwards as the state retirement changes and people's attitude to change, but there is a turning point. So this is where I kind of want to get to, and this is where I want to lead Gillian's piece into. What we really believe is that this thing that we currently call active retirement, and in fact we're looking at a project around how do we reframe this, will be something different. It will be longer, probably late 50s, when people have a bit more kind of financial flexibility, but again dependent on the individual, to early 60s, right through to 80, when people will be mixing it up between paid income, digital nomads, consultancy, gardening, a bit of solar engineering, whatever it might be in their spare time, with doing the things that they love doing. So this period we think is going to get much bigger. So herein lies the rub. We really have to move that 75 moment. We have to make sure that people have well-being, are active, are stimulated, and really believe in themselves in this period. So I really hope I've given Gillian a bit of a cue in a second, but it's no longer therefore about lifespan. Coming back to yesterday and bringing that back in, it's not even about health span, it really is about full span. That's what we want to try and achieve. And that means confidence, connection, contribution. Sorry for repeating myself, but I'm not really sorry. The 3 C's are super important. So I want to ask guys to play the video for my really very good friend, but amazing colleague, the Chief Executive of Saga Spaces, to talk through how we brought all of this together to build the Spaces platform. Gillian, and could you click in the video team?
Good morning, I'm Gillian Monaghan, CEO of Saga Spaces, a commercial technology startup within Saga PLC that's directly aimed at empowering older consumers to live longer, happier, healthier, more purposeful lives. I joined Saga 7 years ago, and working with Lisa Edgar, who you heard from a few moments ago, and the wider Saga team and our customers, I've become passionate about developing solutions for this consumer group. And there's a job to be done here, since the real needs of this audience is largely forgotten in product design today, other than in support, care, and later life, which totally misses the point on the real desire of older consumers. A recent stat from market researcher Mintel found in the 2 years to August 2023 that less than 1% of new product launches in categories including health, beauty, and personal care were targeted at those over aged 55. This came from Mintel's global new products database that tracks and analyses innovation across more than 40,000 fast-moving consumer good product launches every month in 86 markets. Against the backdrop of an ageing population, there's a dramatic shift that needs to take place to meet the needs of this consumer group. And it will take international collaboration across institutions, corporates, and governments, as well as societal change in attitudes and beliefs towards older people in order to effect change. I'm passionate about being part of this, and I'm going to share the journey I've been on with Saga over the past 2 years, focused on understanding, innovating, and launching services directly for older people, in the hope that we can continue to build on the learnings that we have and create better, longer lives. First slide, please. Since the start of 2022, we've been working on an innovation programme that culminated in the launch of a new consumer health tech business in July of this year. The 18-month journey can be broadly broken down into 3 stages of work: research, trials, and innovation. And whilst these were sequential phases, feedback and builds and iteration have been a constant feature to build a truly customer-centric solution. In the first phase of work, we combined consumer and behavioural research with a market scan to help us understand how consumers' needs are being solved today and the size of the market opportunity. These inputs helped us formulate hypotheses to test and to build strategic belief in the opportunity. The next step we took was trialing. We took our hypotheses and designed real-world business experiments, finding solutions available in the market and partnering and marketing these products to our customers, and then generating and disseminating the data that we generated. I'll talk about the key learning themes that we took away from the trials in a moment, but the stand back for us was that there's unmet need in the market and that we need a third phase of work, innovating to fill this need. In the innovation space, we created a digital product to face into the need we could see, targeted at a specific cohort of early adopters with a fresh, familiar user experience, highly tailored to older adults, down to the colorways and fonts that we used that are easier to read and tone of voice that lands well with an experienced demographic. We also had to figure out where our customers hang out and created a marketing strategy to test to generate an audience. On the run up to launch, we reached out to the AgeTech community for more challenge and feedback, including colleagues that are here with us today, John Warner, who you heard from earlier, and from the Global Health Connected Alliance. Since launch, we've been learning based on the data we've generated and iterating when we see trends in our data. Next slide, please. To dive into the first of these 3 themes in more details, our research inputs identified who we should target, what their needs are, and some parameters around how we should engage. This is really important because older adults are a highly diverse group with a multitude of varying needs and aspirations. The who we should target was identified as 65 plus mass affluent women. They make up about 10% of UK over 50s, and they control a significant portion of household spend and are open to trying new things. In terms of their needs, they're aspirational and they're seeking clear purpose and discovery in retirement. With caring responsibilities for parents and children reducing, this time of life is all about them, and they want to make the most of it by looking after themselves, staying in shape, and having the energy to do what they want and choice around how they spend their time. This group is incredibly future focused, excited about what retirement has to offer. And although independence is important, so is community and maintaining a network. In terms of parameters and how to engage through commercial solutions, exceptional quality and value are hygiene factors. This is a discerning and experienced consumer group. Delivering any new B2C solutions hard, but an older audience is a particularly tough crowd. However, they're very sticky and they'll be ambassadors for the right solutions, something that Saga's experienced more widely across our business in serving older people over the past 70 years. In terms of barriers to overcome, clearly a health tech solution has to do the consumer good. And critically for this consumer group, it has to be uplifting and make them feel great and help them learn something new. Again, it's not easy. They've been around and they're already experienced. You've heard from Lisa that there's a real barrier around understanding what's wrong with us in older life and around diagnostics. So we've really got to engage around health and wellbeing in an uplifting way. Triggers are also super important. Our research shows that triggers are often the tipping point to seek out new solutions, maybe a significant milestone birthday or other life events, kids going to university, birth of a grandchild, maybe even divorce or bereavement can all be reasons to reach out for new healthcare solutions. Next slide, please. So with the insight we had and going back to when we started our trials, we developed the hypothesis that EdTech and digital health coaching designed with older consumers' needs at their heart could potentially become scalable solutions. We selected this hypothesis based on the solutions we could see in the market that had a close fit with the consumer needs I've just described. Having set out what we wanted to learn and the intent that partnership could be an appropriate execution model to enter the market, we partnered with some excellent high-quality technology startups who already had EdTech and digital health coaching solutions targeted at our demographic. And we designed experiments and then marketed solutions, gathering data to validate the business cases we drafted based on the data available in the market. For the types of digital subscription business we tested, with free trial periods at the start, there were some critical assumptions in the business cases, including marketing cost or CPA, conversion to becoming a paid member and churn rate, as well as cost to serve. So we collected the data to prove or disprove that solutions we were testing could deliver a scalable business through a B2C model. And all of those metrics that I mentioned were real tipping points within the business cases. At the same time, we were interested in observing consumer behavior. And there were three key macro themes that we took away from our learning that have to be present in solution design to really fulfill the needs of this consumer group. These are confidence, connection, and contribution. Confidence in that services or products must be trusted and, importantly, build trust by design. We know from the Big Windows research that older consumers need a hand through newness and look to brands that they can trust. Connections. During our experiments, we saw customers demonstrate a need to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, and to make new friends and have space to normalize things that they're experiencing and to share some joy. Contribution was the third theme, and here there was a clear need to fill desires and aspirational needs for purpose and progress or learning, as well as pleasure. New products to market targeted at older consumers overwhelmingly miss these points, as well as the other needs we already knew we'd have to serve around quality, choice, and value. We could see that the solutions we tested were part of what was needed, but we believed we needed another component to bring solutions at scale to a mass older audience. Next slide, please. Saga has a database spanning nearly half of over 50s in the UK with a highly trusted brand that served this consumer group for over 70 years. And it really gives customers confidence. Our solution was to create Saga Spaces, a front door to the latest, best and most uplifting experiences online that consumers participate in with others, bringing connection and delivering on the need for contribution. Since feeling energised and keeping well is so front of mind for our target consumer group, the first of Saga's digital spaces directly targets health and well-being, and we'll play you a short video that provides a snapshot of what our subscribers in our health and well-being space online experience. Please, can you play the video? Thanks. Next slide, please. Our solution is a premium digital community for connection, enjoyment, and self-discovery to fit the brief of quality, choice, value, confidence, connection, and contribution. At a price point of £9.99 a month, or just under £100 a year, the platform delivers online events to participate in alongside other subscribers, a wide choice of fitness classes that suit all abilities, from people who are looking to get moving again through to those that love to exercise regularly and are looking for the opportunity to fit another class into their routine. We've seen both of these types of consumer use the platform in the past couple of months, demonstrating the vast differences in need, even within the target consumer segment that we're working with. We also provide live and interactive expert talks with leading academic thinkers and celebrities, talking about their area of expertise or lived experience, with audience participation, or with live TV quality streaming with professional presenters. And we've curated some of the latest and best health and wellbeing solutions on the market that we've tested and our customers can trust because our brand stands in front of them. We've secured brilliant discounts with all of those partners we're working with, and we're passing these on completely to the community. We don't make any money. The discounts are all passed through as a membership benefit. We make our money on the subscription. So it's a really clear pricing model. And it gives customers something incredibly unique that they can access. We started trialling one-to-one and group coaching experiences too, which is providing the space to be heard, connect, normalise and share experiences. Our subscription also provides access to a private GP, mental health experts and other clinicians 24 hours a day with very short waiting times. Our partner tends to serve within about 2 hours of contact. In all interactions, our customers can anticipate joy with an uplifting experience and with a UX that's fresh, familiar and easy to navigate to help through newness, with colours carefully selected to be easier to read for older consumers. Next slide, please. We soft launched in July and we can share some very early headline learnings. We're performing above Saga benchmarks for our marketing campaigns. We have a good level of account creation and multiple X improvement on conversion to paid and churn versus the business experiments we ran last year. Customers are opting for our live interactive events rather than on demand. We're developing the hypothesis that maybe participation and connection are indeed the powerful drivers that we believe they could be. Daily habits are starting to form, with our most frequent users coming to the site more than once a day, and we're starting to become part of their routine and daily lives. The female early adopter hypothesis is playing out, with 2/3 of members being women and more women converting, even when we market to men and women equally, and we've run those specific experiments. Top areas of interest in health and wellbeing are sleep, meditation, flexibility, mobility, digestive health, and getting started moving again after a break with low impact and fun classes. They're all of the top categories that we can see our customers engaging with. Next slide, please. So to wrap up, there are 3 key takeaways from our research, trials and innovation work over the last 18 months. The first is that the needs of the older consumer are not well understood. Product design for older people tends to completely miss the aspirational needs of this powerful consumer group, and research and insight plays a critical role at addressing this and helping us better understand and solve for the real desires of this consumer group in all product design. The older consumer group is a tough crowd. They're diverse, experienced, and discerning, and they're not easily impressed. Quality, value, and choice are absolutely hygiene factors, and solutions in the health and wellbeing space have to be uplifting and to help people feel great, leaning into the underlying needs for confidence, connection, and contribution. The older female consumer is the early adopter. We saw it in our trials last year. And again, even when we've invited 50-50 split of men and women, it's women who are open to trialing new experiences. And we've seen significantly better results in marketing to this consumer group. And of course, this is just a small example of the type of innovation we need to build on together to truly empower longer, happier, healthier, more purposeful lives. Thank you for listening.
Gillian Monaghan, the most collaborative, empathic, commercial, creative, qualified accountant I know. Absolutely brilliant. Thanks, Gillian. Yeah, so I just want to pick up on summarize a couple of the points that Gillian made and then kind of sum up in terms of our ask really going forward. She talked about creating this amazing facility through consumer research. We also have to think about what that means in terms of engagement as well. And she hinted about some of those things. So we're very conscious, obviously, again, being a consumer organisation, that the rubber really has to hit the road and we have to engage people, get them to trial it, get them to stick at it, and then get them to be obsessed by it, to get long-term traction with any product. So obviously we've talked about women quite a bit, but they are the trialists. It is so important to recognise not just who is going to buy this in the long term, but critically who is going to break the ice with these new ideas. And as you saw from Gillian's piece, definitely the women for us. And we think that once we start to mobilise them, the men will come in behind. She also talked about behavioural triggers. We were having a conversation, Michael, over dinner last night around, and indeed over lunch, around how difficult it is to create behaviour change, particularly when what we call generation experience is embedded, what they think are successful behaviours over many decades. So you kind of have to look for those pinch points, those life triggers. When are the moments of change in people's lives? I ran a segmentation for Sport England a few years ago, and they were really interested in how you get the 50-plussers back to activity, physical activity. It was so hard to find in the modelling clear, distinct groups over the age of 50. Why? Because what people did before 50 effectively was just replicated after 50. So really kind of modelling out, that was quite difficult. So getting those moments of change post 50, the key life triggers, really, really important to trigger a trial. Third, affiliative glue. So that's a kind of point to the connection piece. What Gillian didn't have time to say really is they've built into the tech that when you go into a waiting room for a class, you can kind of see yourself as an avatar with everybody else's avatars in the waiting room. The avatars float around and bump into each other. They say hi. You can ask questions of the other avatars. So we've built in a waiting area. The point when people feel perhaps most anxious, most nervous, that they might leave a class before they start it, we've built connection into the tech for that piece of the journey. And then fourth, addictive goals, and this is something we've not done yet, but we are talking about. How do we create the version of the 3 rings? The addictive glue, the goal tracking, the impact evaluation that is sufficiently engaging, easy to use and granular, such that people will feel they want to come back and back and back because they're monitoring how far they've walked in 20 minutes. And just a quick return to the Cass Sunstein and Tali Sharo work on utility, effect and cognition, the basis on which people make a decision on whether to engage in information or not. Just to really say, again, please don't expect the argument to do all the work. Emotions are a very, very powerful enabler. People have to imagine that they're going to feel positive when they try something, or whether they find out something, whether they listen to a talk, they project their emotions in advance. And we have to bear that in mind when we're packaging up the mechanics of the positioning and the advertising to start with. Yeah, so kind of making health stick in summary, we really need to drive initiatives to encourage engagement with health and health interventions at the individual level. You know, we talk about macro solutions to macro problems, but success happens at the individual level, at the marginal level, and we must bear that in mind. Do not, as I keep saying, purely rely on it will be good for you if you do this. The rational argument is not going to cut it on its own. Build health solutions around human-centered design. I know that is so easy to say, but it starts with the consumer and what they need. We have research programs where we don't start even with a product area. We just say, what does it feel like to get older in relation to an area of life? It could be your family, it could be getting around, it could be whatever, money, anything. But it is about understanding needs first, solutions second. Build engagement strategies that realize who is likely to lead the change. You know, the whole point around women that we've been talking about in this example, but there will be other leading indicators, innovators for kind of other developments. And then think about full span, not even health span. How do we make life more meaningful, more purposeful, as Charlotte was saying yesterday, for the new generation? This is not just an aging process, it's a cohort process that's coming through. I mentioned this model yesterday, and it's really a kind of stack up of how we're thinking about things from the top down. HCD, build, you know, immersion in the target consumer, breathe them, breathe who they are and what they need, so that all of our thinking is through what they want. Then drive engagement strategies around the, you know, kind of the where do they hang out? Who are they? You know, what do they want and how do they want it? And ultimately, build yourself a mission to drive beyond health span into full span. So what we ask of the UN, I won't just repeat these because I feel like we're just about to talk about them. So I'm just going to kind of leave them up as a sort of kind of tantalizing teaser, and be that my last slide. So thanks ever so much for listening to me again. It's a true delight to bring this thinking to you, and I hope as a group we collaborate more and take it a step further. Thank you.
So we are going to keep the momentum going on the consumer side here as we talk in this practical way, I hope, about healthy aging. Thanks, Lisa, for getting us started with such a lot of rich information. We're going to jump to the organization that Lisa mentioned, AARP now, and I think Michael Phillips is coming up to the stage, the other side of the act with Charlotte Yeh from yesterday. So Michael, welcome.
Thanks, John. And John, I just want to take a second and thank you and Brian and Declan and Heather and everyone else, Brent, everybody who put this on. This has been a wonderful meeting of the minds, and I'm sure a lot's going to come of it. So thank you for that. So it is the other half. Yesterday, Charlotte spoke about the power of age and the importance of rethinking how we're looking at aging. And just to remind us of a key point I thought that Charlotte made was that as we're looking at aging and aging healthy, as not as a problem to be solved, but a remarkable opportunity, it provides a whole new framework. And I want to take a second to thank all of the innovators and catalysts for innovation for all that you're doing. You're giving people the gift of control over our health, bridging between doctors, patients, caregivers, trauma, and ensuring that the future of care is accessible to all of us when we need it. The tools you're envisioning and designing are reaching remote and underserved communities, transcending borders, transcending wars, improving lives, paving the way for generations to come. So on behalf of AARP, I just want to thank you for everyone listening for all that you're doing to help in healthy aging. So not only is health innovation and digital health about caring, but there's also a lot of money to be made. There are these two collisions happening right now, the demographic shifts that we've heard so much about over the last day or so, and this technology revolution coming together to explode in a collision of opportunities. I heard Tony Blair speak last week, and he said that the technology revolution was probably the most important thing happening in the world today. And he said everyone, I think the point that was most salient for me was everyone is feeling their way through this right now. Governments, administrators, innovators are feeling our way through all of the news, all of the change. He mentioned that as governments, including himself, are wrestling with the day-to-day influx of challenges, it's hard to get perspective, and it takes thinkers like the people in this room to have perspective and advise people who are in these roles in meaningful ways. And you know, there's a lot of impact and a lot of money that's tied up with that. Here in the United States, I've been focused on the digital divide for a lot of years, and the pandemic was an inflection point. I think in a lot of, well, actually in all the countries, the pandemic and lockdowns were an inflection point. We kind of moved past get people connected to get people meaningfully connected. The number of people online here in the United States that are 50 plus, now 90% of everyone has a smartphone in their pocket over the age of 50, which is almost the same as younger cohorts. As Charlotte mentioned yesterday, the average number of devices in an older person's home that connects to the internet now is 6. Then the amount of spend is going up and is going to continue to increase. And this number, by the way, that's our projection, only represents hardware spend. It doesn't represent services, gifts, and other things. It's only going to get bigger. I think what we need to focus, the frame that we've been looking at to focus are how do we overcome the remaining barriers? And you know, at one side, there's about 2 million people in the world, give or take, that I would personally classify as a non-digital native, kind of my age and older. We didn't grow up with a smartphone or a tablet in our pocket. We learn to use it, not in our crib, but a little bit later in life. And the way that we adopt those technologies are different. And how do we connect people like us and older to all of this amazing innovation and health tech that's coming down the pipe quickly? And we've been evaluating the barriers for a number of years, and it starts with the infrastructure. The good news on the infrastructure side is most communities, most places around the globe are being connected or have plans to be connected due to being able to leapfrog technologies with 5G, with in-band frequencies, with solar power and other newer technologies that are allowing remote places to be connected. This is what the United Nations Secretary General is talking about when he says he wants every man, woman, and child around the globe to be connected to the internet by 2030, universal connectivity. But beyond that, we also need affordability. And the good news there is communities have realized that by connecting the digitally underserved, there's an economic boost that happens in that community. So they're investing the money in the infrastructure, the affordability, and the skills in order to make sure that the connection is there, mainly for economic purposes, but it helps us all. Here in the United States, we currently have the ACP program in place, the American Connectivity Program, which reduces the internet to about $30 a month for for low-income families. We hope that will continue over time, and we hope more governments will pass more subsidies to help people who are underserved. The third barrier here, digital skills, is growing. We work, our affiliate Oats and Senior Planet have identified a three-legged approach that we recommend for all communities around digital skills. The first is to have a large payer, a large funder. That funder can be tech industry, it can be health industry, it can be governments. Second, in the middle, there's a curriculum provider who's an expert on keeping curriculum up to date and targeted for the audience. And third, you have to have local support in the communities who understand the audience and the needs of the audience in those communities. And building those alliances, those partnerships, is what's driving digital skills globally. I think that AI is helping in that because curriculum can easily be translated into other languages, and also can keep up with the quick updates to technology that's been for a long time been a challenge for digital skills and digital literacy programs. These first three barriers kind of represent what we talk about when we say digital equity and keeping underserved populations online. But in order to have meaningful connectivity where we're using the tools that we have to live a healthier life as we age, there's a few other barriers that we have to traverse. There's user-friendly design. And when I think about user-friendly design, safe and easy interfaces and experiences, I think about the COVID vaccines here in the United States. When the COVID vaccines first came online, there were a lot of websites popping up in different communities for registering our oldest members of society for the vaccine, and they were horrible. The user interfaces were terrible. They weren't secure. You couldn't get through. People gave up on them, or if they didn't have a family member to help them navigate these websites. And it's likely that people died because they couldn't get through those sign-up processes. So making sure that all of our essential services and innovation are designed with older populations in mind is going to be a key area, and increasingly going forward. Trust and privacy. Our research shows that if people don't trust it, they won't use it. And trust and privacy is a growing barrier, growing concern. That incorporates fraud and scams, cyber risks, misinformation, which is growing because of AI, generative AI, obviously, and data privacy. What are you doing with my data? And then lastly, just awareness of the tools that are relevant for me where I am in my life. Each of these barriers are bespoke. They require different alliances and different partnerships in order to traverse. And so I'm really glad that we're here today talking about those things. Just real quickly, we've been surveying for a long time to understand the barriers to adoption in the United States. And as a snapshot in time, right now, our members are reporting design and user experience is the #1 barrier across the barriers that are there. They're saying that the technology is not designed with them in mind. They're saying that they're saying that the user experiences don't reflect them. We did a co-design just yesterday that with Orca and Oats, and I was looking over the data this morning, and it was the same story. I want to know where to find instructions when I have a question. I want it to be intuitive. I don't see that myself in the design. And the interesting thing about this is any product team that is co-designing and getting feedback from older adults is immediately going to identify this. They're immediately going to identify the desire that people have for clear instructions or a place to go for help or intuitive click-throughs that might be different for a non-digital native than for a younger user. So, I'll come back to that in just a minute. I did want to say, even though the adoption of devices in the United States is the same with older adults as younger adults almost, the regular usage across different normal activities is not always the same. And I think a lot of this is driven by the by the design processes around some of these universally used services. So this is our North Star. This is what we're trying to affect, particularly in the areas where it impacts healthy living, financial security, and essential services. But it's not just the designers and the developers of the technology. I think one study that we've seen out of the UK recently showed that it's clinicians as well, as far as recommending digital health apps. So for younger patients, clinicians recommended digital health apps only 1 out of 10 times, or did recommend 1 out of 10 times. For older patients, it was 1 out of 50. That's a big gap. Why are clinicians not recommending digital health apps for older adults at the same rate as they are for younger adults? Do they think that it can't be helpful? Do they think that it's not as useful? I think that these are the questions that we have to ask and address as part of our overall healthy aging activities. When we ask people here in the US who are using digital health apps on their phones, why did you adopt it? Why are you using it? The number one thing that pops up is to improve my health and to attract my health. This is the number one driver to adoption for digital health. And a close second is my doctor recommended it. After that, there's a little bit of a gap, and then the other factors for driving adoption include it was easy to use. I had a health condition, and that health condition was a trigger for me to adopt a health app. I felt like my privacy, my personal information was secure, so I continued using it. I like to track my exercises. It was affordable, and I like to set goals and try to reach those goals. That an app was free was last, and I think that that shows that people will adopt and pay for technology that's useful, that they feel will help them effectively reach their goals, attract their health, and are easy to use. Like I said, we do a lot of lived experience panels, and what we're hearing people say they want in their digital health apps, they want co-design, they want feedback, they want their feedback to be heard, they want to see themselves in the products and services that they use, and a lot of times that means clear instructions, clear click-through, clear setup instructions, because it's not just the interface, it's the full end-to-end experience, which includes acquiring, configuring it into your life, into your networks, into your devices, and where to go for help, and so forth. Also, we hear this often, people want a personalized experience. People want for the designers and developers to think about where they are, what they're dealing with at that moment. Maybe it's a hearing or a sight or a mobility challenge. Maybe it's just a trigger or a health condition, or where they are, what they're doing. Maybe they don't have good internet connection and they want a device that they want an experience that allows them to use it when the internet's connection isn't great. Whatever those are, I think that's interesting to me because it sort of goes against universal design a little bit. Universal design says design for everybody. What we hear people say is design for me. And sometimes that can be done at the same time. I'm hearing more and more from the design community thoughts of how to design for accessibility, how to design for aging, how to design different experiences for different cohorts. And I think that's an interesting change and an interesting shift that we're going to be watching over time. And I mentioned the clearer instructions. One thing that I've learned personally by going around talking to product teams from the leading tech organizations is within the product teams, there's a misunderstanding between age-inclusive design and accessible design. There's an idea that if I'm adhering to the accessibility compliance standards, YCAG, W3, whatever, then I am designing for older adults. And what we know is that's not the case, that people adopt technology differently depending on where they are in life. What we originally started our journey thinking was, well, this is great. We can build training programs for designers, for developers, so they understand age-inclusive design, People will want the certification, the badge on their resume, and it will be useful. And what we heard was, no, that's not what designers and developers want. They're busy. They have agile sprints. They have big backlogs with lots of feature enhancements. What product teams want is checklist, the answer, compliance, regulations. Just tell me what to do. I'll add it into the product, and I'll keep moving. So I think that that's an interesting learning for us when working with designers, developers, and product teams around healthy aging apps. Is people just want to know what to do. The designers are busy, and the more that we can tell them do this, the more helpful it is for them. I want to close out with 4 different opportunities to engage with AARP. If you see a need for your organization or anybody that you're working with, starting with this age inclusive design guide that we've created for product teams. Happy to send you a copy of it if you just drop me a note. It covers the 10 areas, 10 phases of technology design. I just want to mention a couple of them real quick, starting with metrics. And this is one thing that I think we all know. If an organization isn't measuring something, they're not going to do it. So we've included a lot of different age-inclusive metrics that organizations can pick from and put into their KPIs, their OKRs, that target healthy aging and healthy living. So we'd be happy to send those along. Co-design is the most important thing here. Getting feedback and including older adults of different communities in the process. I want to talk to use case development in just a second and build on what Lisa and Gillian shared around triggers and behavior change. But I did want to say adoption. Adoption is different for older adults than it is for younger cohorts. I'm generalizing here and I apologize, but 20-somethings love to go in, download an app, try it out, test it out, find out if it's useful or not, and either get rid of it or adopt it into their life. Older adults have, generally speaking, have a different way of processing this. They like to learn, and learning is enjoyable. They like to be taught through instructions. They like for people to tell them, walk them through things. They like webinars. They like online videos. And once people are comfortable with learning how to use a new app, it's a new skill. They see it as a new skill. We hear this often, and they want to share that skill. They want to share that with others and show other people how to use this new innovation that they've learned. It's very different. So love talking about that if anyone's interested. When we talk about use case development, we don't, like Lisa and Gillian said, we don't really see age as the number that people, the age that people are, because people are passing through these different life stages at different points. I thought it was interesting, Lisa, you were talking about the age and people were in different stages, and we kind of think of it as different stages. At each stage, people are in different ages, and it's the same thing, just kind of the reverse. But we've done a lot of research around these life stages and learned that there's all of these opportunities, all of these triggers. When you're a caregiver, you're stressed often. You're juggling work stresses, home life stresses, and caregiving stresses, and you're looking for shortcuts. You're looking for easy things to do, and that's an opportunity to reach people where they are. When somebody becomes an empty nester for the first time, here in the United States, that family has an average $27,000 more in their budget for a year than they did when they had kids in the house. People are interested in home improvement. They have more space in their house. They're interested in home improvement projects and building new tribes, new communities, new people, new social connections. That provides opportunity. People career encoring and wanting to do something new, whether it be volunteering or a new job or a part-time work, and learning new digital skills around career encoring. And grandparenting is an interesting one to me. When people become a grandparent for the first time, they often have a renewed interest in their own longevity and energy and health and want to adopt new healthy habits at that moment. So I think each one of these offers an interesting array of opportunities and challenges to address. And would love, if you'd love to talk about that, would love to. Real quickly, we talked about awareness of all of the hundreds of thousands of digital health apps. Want to thank John and others for helping us think about this in a new way at AARP and develop an assessment framework that thinks about that takes in the usability and the safety concerns that older adults are looking for. We're building and testing out a framework, and we want to be able to partner with others in order to help people find the right health apps. So happy to talk to anyone about that. And thank you, those of you who are working on the digital health assessment framework for society. Thank you for the work you're doing there. And last thing, if you're not familiar with the AARP AgeTech Collaborative, it's a wonderful group. Charlotte mentioned it yesterday. There's over 300 organizations, mostly startups, but also test beds, enterprises, and venture capitalists. If you're interested in connecting to the AARP AgeTech Collaborative, just drop me a note. I'd be happy to fill you in and share that. And with that, I think I'm out of time, so I will say thank you for having me.
Okay, I want to keep the momentum going, but thank you, Michael, for that very practical presentation. We are going to allow a little bit longer for a panel session. It was foreshortened yesterday. Before we do the last of those formal speeches, before we have that panel, is going to be from Scott Collins, who you heard from yesterday, who also will build on the story that he told us then. Scott, over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I've been doing this for more than 20 years in this space, and I'm just going to tell you before I get into any comments, the content between yesterday and today with regard to healthy aging is hands down the best I've been a part of. Absolutely brilliant content. Hopefully people will go back and listen to the recordings because the information that's been delivered by our panelists has been absolutely fantastic. So I think over the last day and a half, you've heard some of the justification from a macro standpoint as to why healthy aging is such an important topic and such an important economic and social opportunity. Our friends at AARP have been pioneers in raising awareness about this and continue to be the standard bearers here in the US. The presentation from Lisa and Gillian this morning, I think, is a case study that every company that is developing products here in the US or around the world should study. It is a roadmap for how you move and shift the mindset from innovating for older adults to innovating with older adults, and you can see what happens when you do that. Absolutely brilliant content. So we've talked a lot about putting the older consumer at the center of design. And I thought it was really interesting how Lisa shared that when they begin a project, they don't necessarily start with an idea. It's more or less a blank canvas, that fuzzy front end of innovation, and then see where the consumer takes you. And I was reminded of a project we did nearly 10 years ago with Ohio State. And we took two different groups of cross-functional students. So nursing, marketing, business, engineering. And we paired them with residents at two senior living communities in Columbus. And we said, build something innovative. And it was really amazing to watch how that unfolded and the direction that the ideas went based on the consumers really leading that. What was maybe most interesting is as they were going through this, it was for part of a class that was graded. And after spring break, they were supposed to make presentations. The two groups, one of our points we insisted on was the residents had to be part of the pitch group to really present the idea to the professors. And interestingly, in the middle of the project life cycle was spring break. And the students went away, but the residents kept meeting. And actually, in one case, pivoted the idea completely. And when the students came back, they thought, this is so much better than anything we ever could have come up with. So when they finished the project, it was really incredible to see the bond that had formed between the residents of these communities and these students, and the awakening or the awareness that, wow, when we engage with older adults, magical things can happen. So we've heard all about the justifications for why this is such an important topic, so I'm not going to belabor that. I want to focus on how we're taking some of those same concepts in terms of user-centered design and applying it to healthcare. As I shared with you briefly yesterday, healthcare, especially here in the US, is very siloed. Everybody tends to stay in their lane, hospitals innovating with hospitals, post-acute care, senior living, innovating in that part of the healthcare ecosystem, and never the two worlds shall meet. And along the way, the payers are largely left out of the design of these solutions, as are the policymakers. And so with that as a backdrop, we really felt like we should take a page out of our own playbook as it relates to innovating with older adults and start innovating with the healthcare ecosystem broadly. And so that's why we created Linkage Launch. This was really born out of an idea that we wanted to engage participants from throughout the entire healthcare ecosystem, not just one part of it, to create solutions to address major friction or pain points that are articulated by them. So much like with Lisa's team, when they start with a blank slate, we do that with our ecosystem partners. We don't come in presupposing that this is a problem we want to solve and ask them to validate whether or not that is a problem worth pursuing. Instead, we ask them, where are those pain points? And remembering that our focus is on how do we help our US healthcare system work better for the older consumer, so that that patient journey, as they navigate through a very complex and confusing healthcare ecosystem, is maybe a little bit better. But along the way, we also want to be mindful of the people providing care for older adults in any care setting. We talked yesterday about declining birth rates and the fact that there are fewer and fewer formal and informal caregivers available to care for our rapidly aging population. So what we do is we go through a journey with our ecosystem partners, and it really starts with customer discovery or listening. Where are those pain points? And again, remembering that we also want to think through or view this through the lens of the social determinants of health, not just as it relates to older adults, but as it relates to the people providing care for older adults. So beyond that, then what we do is we start ingesting ideas and begin to see whether or not there's an addressable market and do some validation work to understand, hey, maybe there's already a great solution out there that we've stumbled across that others don't know about. Then instead of reinventing the wheel, let's publicize that, let's make that information available to our ecosystem partners so they can begin implementing those tried and true solutions. And then if we don't find something out there, can we put a team together, a cross-functional team with partners from throughout healthcare to build the solution ourselves? So unlike what we do in the world of private equity through our Ziegler linkage funds, which is hope a smart entrepreneur comes up with a solution to a problem they think we have, stumble across our funds and pray that it matches up with our investment thesis, and then we put some capital in and maybe take a board seat and hope for the best. And we like to do more than that in terms of helping them access our domain expertise and accessing markets. But beyond that, it's very much out of our control. So these are opportunities for us at Linkage Launch to build companies ourselves in partnerships with providers so that we do a few different things. One, we make sure that we're solving real world problems, and we're making sure that those solutions can scale across all the different segments of healthcare, so that it works equally well in the skilled nursing facility as it does in assisted living or in the hospital or in primary care. And then what we do is we test that and we validate it with the users and make sure that as we build these products, that it really is solving the problems that we set out to solve and that we're doing the job that was set out to be done. And then we launch it. Initially within our stakeholder group, which is a nice way to de-risk these solutions because we're building them in partnership with the people who are going to be our customers. It gives us a very nice initial market to beachhead into the broader process when we scale these solutions. So to date, we've launched 2 businesses. off this platform. And they're both focused on helping to solve one of the most significant pain points being experienced by care providers, not just here in the US, but around the world. And that's the challenge of finding labor. Now we've seen, sometimes they try and solve it through staffing agencies, sometimes they try and solve it through different means, but we've taken a little bit of a different approach based on the feedback that we got from different stakeholders in our network. And so we've created one business we're piloting right now that is really focused on delivering a different concept of benefits to healthcare workers in self-insured programs. And we looked at them through the lens of the social determinants of health, because in our part of healthcare, in the post-acute space, a lot of times they're very costly care setting, very beautiful retirement communities, and we're asking people to provide support to older adults who can't even take care of themselves. These caregivers, many times they have housing instability or insecurity, food insecurity. They're in a very difficult personal environment. They don't know where they're going to be living 3 months from now. So how can we think differently about health and wellness benefits for them so that our providers can better attract, delight, and retain caregivers? So that's what this is about. And along the way, we want to make sure that we have an integrated approach to solving those benefit needs and looking differently at how we drive incentives based on behavioral economics and nudge theory that are customized to the individual. So we have healthcare coverage at Linkage, and if I'm really good and stop smoking and lose 100 pounds and manage my diabetes, I can get a coffee mug or a sweatshirt. Not really an incentive. So what we're doing instead is saying, what would help you live a better life to our self-insured individuals? And let's build the incentives around, if you have housing insecurity, let's help you pay your rent in exchange for you doing some things like maybe losing some weight or going into a smoking cessation program, or managing your diabetes, and then let us help you through preloaded gift cards at a grocery retailer buy your diabetic-friendly products. So really thinking differently about how to solve this labor problem. The other is started out as a technology company focused on robotic process automation, and we pivoted that just over the last several months to creating a solution that is driven off of proprietary artificial intelligence with real-time privacy controls, because we understand the nuances associated and the risks associated with healthcare and the intersection of how AI is going to be used. And so privacy is obviously incredibly important for us. And so listening again to our stakeholders, we decided that we wanted to try and solve a couple of interesting points as our beachhead products. One is through intake and admission. So when someone is discharged to a hospital, part of the problem is our post-acute care providers don't have access to accurate information. That does a couple things. One, it drives a lot of downstream claim denials, meaning they don't get paid on time, and sometimes they don't have the people to refile those claims, so they don't get paid at all. The other is suboptimal care that's being delivered because they don't have an accurate picture of the individual who's coming into their community, and so it results in a return to hospital much sooner than expected. The negative result of that is if it's an unplanned readmission, it can cost up to $25,000 or $30,000 for the payer. So again, engaging the payer, the hospital provider, and the post-acute care provider, and how do we solve this problem and use artificial intelligence to ingest information more accurately, make sure people are attached to the right contracts, and we know exactly what we're dealing with. The other is a very nuanced solution that I was speaking with you earlier about. In the world of rehab therapy and the post-acute world, there's a lot of time wasted every single week between the therapist, the billing person, the MDS coordinator, going through every single patient record who receives some form of therapy, physical, occupational, and speech. They go through and they visually look around a computer at whether or not that care was delivered. Did we document it properly? Are we going to bill for it appropriately? We call it the triple check. It is not a value add to anyone. It's a significant time waster. And our providers told us, if you could use automation tools to solve this problem, that would be incredibly helpful for us. So that's another product that we launched. But beyond that now, what we're doing, instead, we want to take our capability to solve major problems up a level. And so we're working with providers through a comprehensive immersion process. It takes 2 months. One is building a core of knowledge around how artificial intelligence can solve problems. and what it can't solve. Sometimes a good spreadsheet is good enough. And then from there, what are those highest priority use cases that artificial intelligence is appropriately designed for? And then beyond that, we set up some competitions to see which prioritized use cases rise to the top. And then at the end of that 2-month sprint, they come out with their own proprietary branded AI solution with real-time privacy controls that allows them to solve big problems, usually at the intersection between the payer, the post-acute provider, and the hospital system. So how can we focus on using that type of technology to improve health outcomes first and foremost? And how can we do it more affordably and save cost all the way around? And along the way, begin looking at the next generation of products and solutions. So that's what we do at Linkage Launch. We're taking a page out of the Saga playbook and putting the provider, in this case, at the center of that design process, and hopefully developing the next generation of tools, products, technologies that are going to help them do their jobs better. Because at the end of the day, we have to have great product design for older adults, and we have to have great product design for the people caring for them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And I think you can see all sorts of practical implications, and I hope it stimulated questions from the audience here in the room and online for follow-up conversations. And indeed, even in this next session, I'd like to call everyone up to the stage who's both spoken this morning and indeed yesterday. So Charlotte, if you'd like to come up as well, Brad, if you'd like to come up, who wasn't able to stay for the panel yesterday. We're going to go straight into a panel session. So please come up to stage behind me. Ravi, if you can come up as well. I'm going to run this panel a little bit differently, perhaps to the ones you've seen earlier, in as much as we wanted to have a conversation more than we wanted to have a series of set questions and answers. And we've got enough chairs up here? We do, Charlotte. I'm going to stay up here, which is a good place to be. So in that sense, I'm not going to try and moderate this. I'm going to ask the first question, and I hope it's the last one I need to ask, because I'd like to have a conversation about everything we've heard yesterday and today, fundamentally. And in fact, feel free to talk between each other, because I think this is the conversation. This is where good ideas come from, fundamentally. So let me kick us off just in terms of a first question. Let me make it at least reasonably philosophical. I think in one of the themes we've heard, and it's perhaps the elephant in the room, is we have a legacy problem in terms of the way we think about aging. And I think we're all trying to retire that in some way, bring new information to bear that says that we can't think of it as a negative. We might argue it's the last ism. You know, we've got legislation for sexism, we've got legislation for racism, but we still have ageism in society. It's in our language, invidiously in many cases. Perhaps, Brad, I'll start with you on the sort of far end of the table. How do we change that in the most impactful ways we possibly can? And I know it's a big question. I said it was philosophical.
Let's start with the easiest question first, right? So the 20th century was perhaps the most progressive century in the history of mankind. We solved for youth mortality largely. We created numerous vaccines that keep us healthy. We began transplants that extend human life. We're now working on gene therapies to do the same thing. It's really spectacular, but somehow in that mix, we forgot about older people and we forgot about aging. Yet these advances opened up the pathway for not just hundreds of thousands of people, but tens of millions, almost 1 billion people worldwide to live into old age. And we haven't reconsidered our systems as a result. In fact, we almost went in reverse. So there's a number of big trends that are happening now that I think we should be keeping a very keen eye on. One is that a growing cohort of people are living healthier, active lives, pushing past the boundaries of traditional retirement. That's a good thing. The challenges that I think I highlighted yesterday and scared the you-know-what out of some people is that our demographics are changing so quickly that our labor markets now are trying to catch up. This is actually going to push us back into a previous way of life that humans lived in civilization for over 10,000 years. And it's very simple. You work until you cannot. That's the way it is. That's the way it was for 10,000 years. And it's coming back, and it's coming back very quickly. So, and it's not that long ago that this was reality. You know, following the post-war period, 1 out of 2 men in this country over 65 were working. By 1990, it was 1 out of 8. We've clawed back to 1 out of 5, and it's on the ascent again. Keeping people engaged in work keeps them healthier for longer periods of time. We're moving away from what I call a vicious cycle, where you retire people earlier than you should. They fall out of the consumer market, they become sick, and they become dependent on society. We're moving towards a virtuous model where people are able to engage longer in paid and unpaid work. As a result, they stay active consumers for longer periods of time. They're healthier. And then the added bonus for the state is they're not drawing on health costs anymore, or at least not at the same degree. And social welfare systems can actually beef up as a result because they're tax-paying citizens. So what can we do to really turn this around? Well, for the businesses that are looking for new opportunities, specifically new market opportunities, there are millions of people literally waiting to be served right now. About 68 million in this country alone, just waiting to be served. That's a pretty interesting marketplace. But we have to do this kind of in tandem, right? We have to get people back into work so they can actually be consumers, because, you know, despite what the data says about the 50-plus economy being so strong, the spending drops off a cliff once people retire. And you move into maintenance and you move into healthcare spend, which is largely driven by public payers. That's just the reality of what post-retirement spending looks like. So if we keep people engaged longer, we've got a healthier community, both financially and physically, but also mentally and cognitively as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Brad. Michael.
Yeah, no, I like that. I want to evoke a conversation that I was a fly on the wall on between Lisa and Bradley yesterday. We talked a lot about age perception, and you know, the age perception, our age perception globally is the gap is widening. So we understand ourselves as being younger from that perspective than maybe our parents or our grandparents did. And you know, I think that's powerful. I think that's impactful, and it shows the opportunities around aging and thriving in place that Charlotte spoke so eloquently about.
Yeah, absolutely. Lisa.
I think so. There's a couple of things. There's the sort of structural points that you're making, and then there's the belief points around how do we associate with age and aging and being old and all of the things that I talked about. I want to come back to the age perception thing in a second. In fact, no, I'll deal with that first. So I think potentially interesting. So when we did the work for the FCA, so we did the work looking at the aging mind as part of the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK as part of their kind of aging population strategy, you know, directing the banks and the insurers how to kind of you know, kind of cater for people at different life stages. I had a conversation with the then UK finance chairman about the anchor points. And we kind of started to kind of move around a sort of thing around newness that we were talking about yesterday, Brad, around, well, I think what you actually do is the last digital thing that you learned in work is sort of the last digital thing that you carry with you in retirement. Yeah. And then I started to think, I think there might be a relationship between age perception as well. So the gap with age perception post-retirement seems to anchor back to that point in work. So there is something very fundamental, I think, about what Brad is saying in relation to actually there's part of yourself that wants pleasure and hedonism and freedom, but there is also a part of yourself that we see time and time again that needs the direction of the work as well as the consumer spending, and we probably need to be mindful of that. And then the other thing that I've been having a conversation with, kind of in my role as Chief Customer Officer at Saga, is that actually changing the conversation happens on the ground. You can have as many big ATL advertising campaigns as you like, but actually changing the conversation in Facebook, especially for women in their 50s and 60s, in WhatsApp groups, in cafes. We need to be much more guerrilla warfare about changing beliefs and conversations in relation to aging, as opposed to a really kind of single, kind of line messaging in an ATL campaign.
Right.
I'm going to stop talking now.
I just want to build on what Lisa said. We live in the age of the influencer. Influencers move markets. When you look at the latest trend on TikTok and you go to the grocery store to buy that kind of cheese, it's gone. And it's because of that. So I think we really need, to your point, think differently about how we utilize influencers to change the perception of aging, and to really think differently about how to position opportunity and present a different picture. So
there was a map that I showed yesterday, if you'll remember, that showed the median age by county across the United States. One of the biggest insights that we've had is that, and this is a historic trend for the states at least, is we wait until there's a serious problem and then we try to figure out how to solve it. So we can look towards certain states and certain regions as essentially incubators for ideas. And perhaps the best state to look at right now with some of the greatest challenges is the state of Maine, because the state of Maine is a super age state. And you go into some regions of Maine, which are very rural, and you'll find that 30, even 40% of the population is over 65. So Maine is a unique testing ground for us right now, because if you go up there, whether it's high season or shoulder season or off season, and you go into just about any store, you'll find the average age of the worker is about 65. And that's going to be pushing change, because it changes the narrative when you are engaging with people as workers every day. We may not like to admit it, but we place a high value on the productive opportunity of each member of society. When you are not a productive member, that starts to fall away very quickly.
That's true. It's also true of Nova Scotia in Canada.
Nova Scotia is actually a very good example in Canada.
Very good.
Yeah, so I learned this morning that I was an active retirement person. And it's interesting, I never thought about my perceived age, but but thinking about it, I feel like, yeah, I am 67. I'm going to own 67. I want to be 67. And this is what it looks like. I've got 3 large language models on my phone that I constantly refer to. And I'm not ceding ground to any 20-year-old on any of these things.
Good for you.
Right? So, I think this notion of how do you enable people to feel like you have the right to do so? And maybe we can start from an employment perspective. I would like to see an active effort in creating work pairs for jobs, where you essentially say, hey, this person at 60, 65, whatever age, may not want to be working 60-hour weeks. Fine, you come in, you do 2.5 days, and this other person does 2.5 days, or do a half-day overlap between either 2 folks that are active retirees, or you can do an active retiree and a 25-year-old. But we need a concerted effort in doing things of that nature, and that's something that AARP and some of the other folks here in this audience can really start to participate in. I spoke to Bob Kramer about this, and he's like, go for it. And so we should really consider looking at that idea.
Great, let's make it happen. Charlotte.
I just want to say it does start with us. each one of us. So I'm thinking, so I showed you pictures of my dad yesterday. Well, he's now going through some cancer treatment. Every time I go in to see a new doctor with my dad, the first thing I do before we even talk about his cancer is I take out the phone and I show him, here's a picture of my dad dancing. Did you know he was in the exercise gym yesterday, et cetera. That conversation with the physician and his care team totally changes. And by the time he leaves the office, I have the clinicians and the nurses saying, oh my God, he is just my favorite patient. I don't want him to leave. Okay. When I see an anesthesiologist who brings, and I said, look, my dad's hard of hearing. I got an iPad. We can do, captioning so that you can talk to him, because if you take out his hearing aid for surgery, he's not going to wake up because he won't hear you that it's time to wake up, right? The anesthesiologist brings out his phone and says, oh, I can use this transcription on my phone. And so what do? I congratulate and celebrate that anesthesiologist. Said, oh my God, you should be doing it. It's that influencer type of role. And we need to have more of those kinds of examples that are in your day-to-day experience. I have a friend who's like in his 70s with hearing loss, but he has totally adapted using his smartphone. He ran into, at a club meeting with somebody else who was having hearing difficulty, had an old-fashioned flip phone. My friend brings out a smartphone and says, hey, let me show you how you can make your hearing. And the next thing you know, the 80-something is going, I'm going to go out and buy one of these, right? We need to make those individual and then highlight it, whether it's on social media or not. And then the third thing is to really reinforce you're never too old to learn. And I was thinking about your benefit package for your assisted living. So years ago, I was on the American Hospital Board, and one of the board members runs a public hospital. Do you know what he did? He put a bank on his hospital property. Now, yes, people could do, their transactions, but he provided through the bank classes on how to manage your money, how to pay your bills, how to do this. And it wasn't for patients, it was for staff, okay? This is the kind of thing is that we can show you can learn at any age, and we make it convenient in your workplace so you are finding pleasure from being in that work, and maybe you can stay longer, and as you move along in your career, you can be one of the teachers back.
So nice segue to perhaps another prompt along the same lines. And Charlotte, I'll start with you because you're really talking about the other trend of the conversations we've had, which is this whole idea of stage versus age. We know that was a very poor mechanism to perhaps segment the marketplace in a very simplistic way. Stage is a better one, but how do we go about implementing that in our thinking in terms of tangible ways in which it changes society? And again, we don't have to go up the line, so let's just get everyone to weigh in on that.
Yeah, one of the big challenges when you don't work for a big legacy organization like AARP, I had the luxury of working there for 15 years, is that you have to engage businesses in a different way. You're not walking through the door with Saga behind you, AARP behind you, and you're forced to meet these businesses where they are. Guess what? Businesses see 18 to 34, and that's it. Mm-hmm. So part of the way that we sell inclusion is to say we can widen your market reach past 18 to 34, not necessarily designing specific products and services for older people. While that's noble, the businesses that are very consumer facing are really trained on this 18 to 34 market. So by showing them that just a little bit of inclusion can lead to an increase in market share has really led to significant dividends for us. And I think that that's one way that we start to move the needle, because going in and saying 65 plus, if you're outside of healthcare, if you're outside of financial services, long-term care is a non-starter in many cases. It's frustrating, especially as someone who's been a tireless advocate for older adults for 25 years, but it's just reality. It's just reality, and it's something that we have to work within.
There's something also there about it, I think maybe inherent in the question is the measurability and linearity of age versus the unpredictability of life stage and the fact that most businesses don't capture that data. So I think it's probably incumbent on us to think about how do you embed life stage triggers or intent signals that are attached to life stages in kind of business modeling, because it's so easy for marketeers to head back to the chronological
and part of that, I
linearity
think,
of
Lisa, is
age.
avoiding generalizations and
Yeah.
avoiding stereotypes, which even we can fall into
Yeah.
sometimes in our language, right?
And as soon as you have that continuous variable, then you fall into the trap of, oh, we only do to this end of the spectrum, not to that end. But if you can move people to life stage data capture and analysis, then it muddies the water and it helps you open the door and slide down the runway, really.
So I want to go back to this concept of influencer, because the big global publicly traded companies many times are most influenced by branding agencies. And that informs how they go to market. It informs research and development. It informs a lot of strategy. I think we need to spend some time influencing the influencers to really, to your point, not just the actual business owner, but who are they listening to, and how can you change some of those perceptions around how to think differently about strategy for your company, how to think differently about where you might want to deploy your R&D dollars, how you might want to think differently about establishing or setting up sales teams, and going to market maybe differently.
The folks that are cracking the code as influencers, though, tend to be outliers, especially older adults. And part of the reason they're getting these endorsement deals and moving companies is because they're really attractive to young consumers.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the traditional concept of
Okay.
influencer. I'm talking about us as influencers to the people who are making those decisions, right? So
Changing the
kind of-
language, Scott.
yeah, thinking differently about how we conceive of influencer.
Charlotte, Ravi?
Well, I think it is going to be influencing, because I know I speak to a lot of tech companies, both large and small, and it really starts with that conversation to say, do you know the size of the market and the purchasing power that you are ignoring? By the way, who is buying more technology, and they buy them not only for themselves, but as gifts to others? That's that older adult. If you can't appeal to that older adult, you are limiting yourself. And when you start having that kind of data and that kind of metrics, you begin to see people shifting. And I've really appreciated, and again, it's one by one by one, but when the CEO of a company will call me a few years later and say, you know, I heard you say that. We just shifted our whole marketing tactic, and I just want to tell you what a difference it made. So what we need is we need the McKinseys, the Mercers, the PwCs to start tracking that kind of data and then begin to influence the employer, the businesses to make that change.
You know, chronology has always been used as a way to segment a market or identify you're 18, you're an adult, you know, and so on and so forth, 50, and you're a member of AARP. And I'm wondering, wait, 50?
You don't have to be 50 anymore.
Oh, okay.
I think we have 1 million members that are 20 to 30.
Oh, okay. So I'm out of date. Yeah. But I think we really have to go back to the concepts when the internet first started coming out. There was a lot of usage of this terminology called mass customization, and I feel like we need to position this whole stage of life marketing capability as a mass customization exercise for a crowd that happens to demographically have a significant amount of wealth. The over 55 crowd today has 72% of the wealth in the country. So in that crowd, you have all of these stages of life, and you know, here's how you define it, here's how you mass customize it. You'll never know who you're marketing to and what their ages are. It is just that this is what they think like and this is what they feel like. Right? I think that maybe that's I don't know what the practicality of that is in approaching businesses, but that's the way I'd look at framing it.
I think the data messages are a bit muddied right now. I don't think they're a bit muddied. I think they're terribly muddied. Because out of one side of our mouth, we're saying this is the wealthiest generation that's ever existed. And out of the other side of our mouth, we're saying this is the fastest growing group of homeless people in the country, the fastest growing group of food insecure people in the country. And I think if you're a layperson, you're saying, well, what is it? Are they the richest or the poorest? Or are they somewhere in between? A slightly more nuanced conversation that speaks to the diversity of this group and the market opportunities and challenges that exist within this group is probably more helpful for a marketer to really understand what's actually there, what's actually underneath the surface.
That's spot on. I mean, if you look at the boomer segment, a third of them have money. 2/3 of them have net assets of less than $50,000. So while there's huge economic opportunity from a marketing standpoint, there's a wave of poverty coming down the road that's massive.
A huge wave of poverty. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, we don't know what the real estate market's going to do. And most boomers, at least in the United States, have the vast majority of their wealth in their home. The vast majority. And most of them are thinking, this will carry me through retirement. This will get me into long-term care, and I might be able to leave something for my kids at the end of the day. We don't know what will happen when they start exiting the market. It could cause a real softening of the market, depressing the value of homes for late boomers and early Xers who are already poorly saved, mind you, for retirement. So there are a lot of variables that we really need to consider, but this is such a large market, it's a very precarious place to be, when out of the other side of our mouths, we're saying they're also the poorest.
I mean, it might, sorry, Michael, you go first. I think it's almost retirement is polarizing. Yeah. You know, we don't have that much in the middle. I think in the UK, the average male who is in the private sector getting to retirement is taking £180,000 into retirement. For women, that's about £86,000 at an annuity rate of 3.5%. That really isn't very much. And also there's a perception of overconfidence around house value and what is capable of doing. People in the UK talk about, going to the seaside and buying a bungalow as a downside, then they can cream off the top some retirement income and some legacy into their children. There's literally no chance of that, buying a bungalow in the UK that's going to leave you any money over the top. But there is a perception that this is the solution to everything. Sorry. Yeah.
And there is that mismatch. So there's a real shifting attitudinal change of what retirement means. So it used to be the vast majority of young and old thought retirement was, it was your time for R&R, rest and relaxation. I think the new attitude about retirement now is that it is a new stage of life. And we don't have the tools of how do you deal with this new stage of life. And I am really, really struck in our data where we look at new to Medicare members. They just signed up for Medicare, the 65 and older, and 1/3 of them say they have no purpose in life. They have no idea what to do, and they're in this lost phase. This is our opportunity to talk about, financial planning. Maybe there's work, maybe, how do you create that contribution or purpose? Is it family? But we don't have the language or the tools because it's always been about R&R. You're going to retire and go to the bungalow. So I think that's our opportunity.
Michael, before we go to the last question.
Yeah, I wanted, just as we're thinking about the perceptions related to life stages and moments that matter in people's lives, more and more so, it's going to be algorithmic. It's the AI generated algorithms and the AI generated content that's going to be fueling these things. So I feel like in some ways there's some good in that and some bad in that. The good is, if I'm out there in my digital world and even in my real world in ways that get captured in my digital twin, whoever was talking about that yesterday, I'm going to continue to see things in my feed, in my advertisements, in my digital experiences that reiterate kind of the things that I'm doing, which could be good, which could be really good for self-perception and perception across aging. But if the algorithms don't take into consideration the the diversity across different aging milestones, and all of a sudden you're an AARP member, so we're advertising you incontinence supplies.
Right.
It could be really bad.
Or pills on TV, for the ailments you may or may not have. So let me use that comment, and I will go up the line. Charlotte, this time I'll give you fair warning. I'll start with you and we'll go along the line. And I want to take a leaf out of the book with the Green Health segment last night. It strikes me we've got a common agreement, I think, in this particular group that we've got rich research. Individually, Brad, you're doing research, AARP clearly are doing it, Saga clearly comes from a research base, Scott, you come from a research base, and I think, Ravi, you and I would agree that we start from research in exactly the same way. Yes, it needs to be more granular. How can we collaborate, I mean, in this panel, this group of people right now, because we have a rich subject with many, many areas, in order to create perhaps ideas for best practice, to bring about this education of not just older adults, but the whole of society, just in terms of what needs to change? How might we go about doing that specifically, starting with this group of people, and then maybe recruiting to it? Charlotte.
I guess there's so many places we could start. I do think it has to do with the imagery and perception. So part of it is how we might look at the images and the way we market. It's the storylines. Should we, now that the actors are going back and the writers are going back, I mean, it's really sad to me that, only 5%, maybe it's increased a little to 20%. If you look at the top movies, 5 to 20% are people of older age that actually have dialogue, that have the leads. And in fact, the most common roles they play is monarchy, military leaders, or gangsters,
Right.
that lead. So we need to start, showing that kind of, so people can visualize what that new piece could be, because you can talk about it all you want, but if you don't see it, you can't imagine it's for you.
But Charles, if I take that idea, and just for the rest of us, we're going to run out of time, in what place, in what forum, in what platform do we store even that one idea as an idea on which we build? So there's the idea. We want to see more people featured in society that balance out the way we see the stereotypes. How do we create that platform? Just in brief, at least at the beginning of that journey. Ravi, do you want to go?
Yeah, I was going to say, I propose that we create a Thriving Futures collaborative that maybe you can start as you start everything else. Well, you get me into these things, and I figured I can give you some assignments back.
The smart home back.
Yes. So I think the Thriving Futures Collaborative is a way for us to maybe get together at least on once every month basis to think about how do you want to plan? What are some of the things that are possible? Who's already doing some stuff that we can leverage and ride on top of?
Okay, very good. Scott.
I'll just take it from a healthcare perspective. At Linkage Launch, we're looking to bring in more healthcare providers and corporate partners, payers and policymakers into our ecosystem so we can innovate differently around the future of healthcare. And certainly these conversations are a key part of that.
I mean, just very practically, we could agree to meet every couple of months online and just discuss the stuff that we're doing and exchange ideas with, a facilitator. I'd be up for that.
Okay.
I think in the digital world, the front lines is user journey creation. That's where it all really hits the road. And I love Scott's example from Ohio State of a multi-generational cohort creating these user journeys together. And there's input from older adults and learning from younger generations. That's magical.
All right, very good. Brad, bring us home.
Yeah, I would say three things, three points. The first is triage and agree what the most pressing issues are. Second is test approaches to those pressing issues. And three is learn from them and adjust accordingly. Right now, we're kind of going 1,000 different directions, and everyone's going after a certain segment here and a certain issue there. And there's no kind of central coordination, not that
or prioritization even.
Just a prioritization, like what's the issue? What is the number one thing we're trying to solve for here? Are we trying to stimulate a marketplace, or are we trying to make sure that people can live with health and financial security? What are we choosing?
Yeah.
If we choose one, it at least allows us to dedicate some more concrete resources to solving for that problem and then moving on to the next one.
Yeah.
It also allows us a much easier narrative to go to our governments and big organizations, well-funded organizations, and say, listen, we've come to this agreement. This is what we go after. Will you fund it? Will
And
you
here's
get
the
behind
evidence
it?
for that even.
Yeah, and
Charlotte,
get
have
evidence.
the last word.
Oh, so I'm building on all of this, and I'm thinking, you know, you have children's museums, science museums. Where is our science of the future of age? And then you could have rotating exhibits. You could have touch and feel. You could have the storytelling and pick on those big areas, but that can be your starting point for bringing together the multidisciplinary and then demonstrating this has value to policy, to regulatory environment.
Very good. Well, I'm going to draw things to a close. I will offer up, I am happy to coordinate this. I'd like to offer up that the ECHAlliance would be very much interested in this being an ecosystem or a roundtable. We can talk with ECHAlliance folks about that in this conference, but I'd like to thank everyone on the panel today and for your contributions before.